Track Chats. My name is Kinley Andrew, and I am the coordinator for new student and family programs here at Virginia Tech. Before we begin, I wanted to say congratulations to all of our newest Hokie families as early action decisions came out last week. Welcome to the Virginia Tech family. For today's episode of Hokie Track Chats, I am joined by our graduate assistant and my friend Jess Sylvia, who y'all have heard on the podcast before. Jess, how's it going?
Thanks, Kenley, and congrats again to those who got some good news last week. Welcome to the Hokie Nation. I'm personally doing great. I'm really excited about getting our student leaders ready to welcome the incoming class. But how are you doing?
Of course. Thanks so much for being here. I'm great. My mom visited me this past weekend, and we went to Roanoke, got some good thrifting in, and watched a few episodes of shows that I haven't seen in a while, like Project Runway and Undercover Boss. Do you remember those?
I do. I actually used to watch a lot of The Deadliest Catch with my dad, and also Mythbusters was like a huge thing for me growing up.
It's funny that you mentioned Mythbusters because today we're actually kind of doing our own version of Mythbusters.
What a coincidence.
I recently asked my students to share some myths that they had heard about Virginia Tech and college. So today we'll actually be discussing these and sharing, the myth and then the reality of those myths. I thought it would be helpful for the families of our Hokies to know the full truth about what their student can expect here.
There are definitely a lot of misconceptions that people have about coming to college or just having a college experience overall. And I'm sure that there are some very silly ones affiliated with our own campus as well.
Right, for sure. After talking to my students, I figured we could talk about, the general college myths that people have about the overall experience. And then we can talk specifically about the ones for Virginia Tech. I actually invited Lily, one of our student coordinators, to talk about the Virginia Tech ones, so she'll be joining us later on the podcast.
Sounds great. Let's get into it.
All right, Jess, so our first myth that we'll talk about is you are going to be best friends with your roommates. And I thought this one would be good to include because, roommates are definitely a new experience for most of our students coming in. This is the first time that they'll likely be living with a new person, especially often a total stranger. So I wanted to talk about this a little bit, both on, a universal experience, but also we can share a little bit personally. My first year, I had a roommate who we ended up moving in again together for our second and our third year. And so we weren't necessarily best friends, but we were really healthy and functional roommates. And so there's lots of, different types of roommate relationships that a student can have.
Mm-hmm. Absolutely. I also went random when I was a first-year student at my undergrad to find a roommate, and it ended up working out well enough. I mean, we definitely were not best friends, but we were able to live well together, which I really think is the only important thing. Mm-hmm. Something that was super helpful for me, our RA gave us like these little forms where we talked about like, were we comfortable sharing? How clean did we want the room?
Right, a little roommate contract.
And so yes, that felt a little awkward, but it ultimately was really helpful to know like what kinds of boundaries we both wanted to have. And good news is we were on the same page for a lot of things, but I knew that if we weren't, like we could have used the resources available, like our RAs or even just like our other friends to help us through that conversation.
Right, absolutely. I think talking about those clear expectations can mediate and honestly prevent a lot of those roommate conflicts because, me and Jonathan talked about it in our last episode about, families and students talking about those clear expectations and boundaries. But that goes for really any relationship or any dynamic between two individuals, especially two people sharing a room. Your student may be best friends, but they also might be a roommate disaster. That is a possibility, and it's impossible to prevent that. But there are tons of resources available, like their RA, like you said, that they can reach out to that person, mediate those conflicts. I know that there's also like roommate swaps that they can do. So if it is worst case scenario, which is extremely rare, there's outlets for them to, get out of those situations. The next myth is about the freshman 15. This is definitely one that I'm sure most people have heard of. I will start off by saying it's not inherently untrue, but it's not a guarantee either.
I think it really is up to like the individual person and what their habits are at college and how that might vary from, maybe if they were living at home with their parents, their parents they'd be in sports or their parents would make them dinner and things like that. And so it's easy to have a more regimented schedule when you're not at college. And for a lot of folks, I know that this was true for me. I had to figure out, like, okay, when am I actually going to eat and what will I be eating? I also grew up heavily doing ballet, so I was working out almost every single day in high school. And then when I got to college, I didn't have that daily kind of reassurance that I knew I would be active. So I had to kind of create those opportunities for myself. And so I personally did not experience gaining the freshman 15. I had friends that did, but again, like, it really is up to the individual person and what they're kind of involved in. Yeah,
definitely. You know, I played sports similarly in high school, and growing up I was doing flag football after school. So even though I wasn't necessarily carving out time to go to the gym, I was actively every single day moving my body. And I don't think until coming to college and not having that opportunity, or not really being forced, I suppose, into physical exercise, how important that movement is. And so, you know, if your student does gain the freshman 15, that's the other thing. This is a learning experience, right? So the freshman 15 is not worst case scenario when it comes to what your student will experience. It is normal for a person's body to change right when they enter a completely new phase of life. They are feeding themselves for the first time. The dining hall has, me and Lily will talk about the dining halls later, but the dining hall has desserts every single day for every meal. So, you know, it's going to be really tempting to go for like the chicken tenders and fries, but there's also really healthy and, you know, sustainable options for students to engage in as well.
And also, I have, as a grad student, utilized Macoma's gym, and they have some really great facilities over there. I know that they also have, like, group workout classes if you need to hold yourself a little bit more accountable by being in a space with other people doing the same thing. There's also, I know that they have open swim hours at the pool, so there are definitely options on campus and around Blacksburg that students can take advantage of as well.
Right. And depending on where your student is located on campus, you know, encourage them to walk to class instead of taking the bus, or, you know, take the stairs instead of the elevator. That's something that I've been doing now that, you know, I'm working every day, is just in those little ways, finding opportunities to get my body a little bit more active. And so, like I said, definitely nothing to be ashamed of, and certainly is not required, or, you know, every student doesn't experience it, but it is something that can happen, you know, because this is a new transition and people are learning how to take care of themselves. Our next myth is that it's hard to make friends in college. I know that, you know, this can definitely be true, but Jess, what do you think about this, you know, when it comes to making community and making friends in college?
Absolutely. I mean, I can remember when I first got on my small little college campus, and I was honestly super terrified. It wasn't that I wasn't a social person. I was, but taking that first step to put out yourself can be pretty daunting.
For sure.
Thankfully, again, I lived on campus, so I was able to know my roommate and some of the people that were on my floor. And so they were kind of my first group of friends. But then once classes started, I started realizing that there were a few people that were in a lot of my classes. So I, like, took the step to be like, hey, do you want to study for this test? And then that would turn into, like, a friendship. And so I think those little small interactions you have really do have the potential to become something greater. I think also at Tech we have, like, this is an over-exaggeration, but, like, literally a million student orgs. Like,
at least 900.
I know that there's, like, chocolate milk Mondays or something. Yes. So there literally is something for everybody.
That's so true.
And if you're going to a place where there's already this understanding that you're all interested in this one specific thing, it's going to be really easy for you to meet other people and, like, call them your friends.
Find some common ground with people. The other thing is, like, especially for first-year students, everybody is as eager to make friends as your student will be. And so it is not embarrassing to, like, knock on your neighbor's door and say, hey, my name's Kinley. I would love to hang out with you. And they will likely be like, yes, please. I have no friends. Because everybody is new here. And even if they came to, you know, Virginia Tech with someone from high school or, you know, from their hometown, they want a new experience and they want new friends. And so encourage your student to put themselves out there, because the worst thing is that that person isn't your new best friend, but the best thing is that maybe they are. Over the summer, one of the orientation leaders I supervised would talk about how on the first day of class, he would purposely not bring a pencil or a pen because it would give him an opportunity to ask the person next to him if he could borrow one. And, you know, maybe that person ended up just being the person they sat next to in class, but sometimes that person would end up being someone at the very least he could rely on throughout that class, you know, to get notes if he missed or to study with. And so those little things, like you said, can really, add up to become something a lot bigger.
Yeah. I feel like also if there is someone who you want to be friends with, there's a really good chance they also want to be your friend. I will use Kelly and I as an example.
We both wanted to be friends with each other.
But we were too shy to just say, hey, do you want to hang out? But we both got here at the same time. And Jonathan knew the both of us. And he was like, hey, Jess, I really think you should reach out to Kenley. And I was like, yeah, okay, whatever. And I'm sure he was saying similar things to Kenley.
100%.
And it took us literally months to, like, reach out and, like, break the ice. And now we literally hang out and talk all the time.
Right.
So, again, you might not know it, but that other person might be just as interested in you for friendship as well.
Right. Just take the leap of faith, because friend crushes are real. And if your student has one, chances are they will get along great with that person. Another myth that one of my students submitted is that everybody in college has sex. Similar to a lot of things such as partying, which Lily and I will get into later, sex is something that college students do. Like, that is not taboo, it is not uncommon, but it's also not universal, right? And so this is the first time where students are living on their own and, making relationships with people that are new to them and maybe having their first romantic relationships. And so while we're not going to sit here and say, no one has sex on a college campus, I think everyone would know that that would be a lie, but it also does not mean that everybody is doing it either.
Yeah, I definitely agree. It's not something that does not happen, but it's also not something that happens to everybody, especially if, somebody doesn't feel like they're ready to. I mean, that is totally okay. And the thing is, if a student does choose to have sex while they're in college, there are a lot of resources on campus and, again, around the area for them to do so in a way that is safe, and that way they are making well-informed decisions.
Right. There's, we have Schiffer Health Center that does free testing for students. I walked past a sign literally yesterday that in Squires, in this building, they were doing free HIV testing. We have free condoms and like Hokie Wellness, and I know the LGBTQ Resource Center has free condoms. While we are not actively engaging with students in their decision making, we're at least providing them, the resources to make decisions that are safe. And so encourage your student to be honest, with you, or at least with someone they trust on campus, to talk about these things, or at least seek out those resources to make those decisions in the safest way possible. Our last myth is that when you go to college, you have to fend for yourself. And, this student when they submitted this myth, talked about, they had no idea that this amount of resources were available to them. And so before they came to campus, they thought that this next chapter of their life, where they had to figure all of this out, that it was going to be completely on their own. And that is literally so far from the truth.
Not to plug orientation programs or anything, we do provide access to a lot of those resources through our programming. But chances are, if you are on a college campus, especially Virginia Tech's campus, and there is a problem you're having or something that you need, there's probably an office dedicated to it.
100%.
And if there's not, there is somebody who does it as part of their work.
Right.
It's just a matter of knowing who to ask or even what to look for.
Right.
So, for example, there's the Counseling Center, there's Hokie Wellness and Schiffer, which both kind of deal with health in different ways.
Right.
You've got the Dean of Students Office, who can provide emergency assistance and
funding.
Like, through funding, thank you.
Yeah.
There's truly a plethora of resources, even identity-based resources here.
Right.
So, even just a quick little Google search, like Virginia Tech, XYZ. I promise that there is something to help you
100%. Yeah, I was going to bring up the emergency funding too, so I'm glad you mentioned it, because if it's not a resource that Virginia Tech provides for free, if they need to go elsewhere and find it, like that emergency funding, our friend had to fly home last year because of an unfortunate death in the family. Yeah. And because it was unforeseen, they did not have, they weren't prepared to spend that money on an emergency flight. And the Dean of Students Office was able to buy those tickets for them. And so encourage your students to reach out to someone, even if it's not the someone who provides that solution or that resource, that person, especially here in this office, at least, because, we're lucky enough to work with campus partners all across the campus. We will know who to point them to. And so if your student doesn't know who to ask, tell them to ask us, because we are going to be happy to, if not help them ourselves, provide them someone else who can help them. That was our last myth when it comes to, the general college experience. For this next portion of today's episode, I will be joined by one of our student coordinators, Lily Crawford, and we're going to talk about some myths about Virginia Tech specifically.
Hey y'all, my name is Lily Crawford. I use she, her pronouns. I am a junior from Sterling, Virginia, studying international relations with minors in leadership and social change and French. I was an orientation leader this past summer, which was the summer of 2021. And this coming summer, I'm going to be a student coordinator for the new Student and Family Programs office here at Virginia Tech.
Perfect. Welcome, Lily. Super excited for you to be here. Just for some context for everyone listening, our student coordinators are returning orientation leaders who will help this next orientation team, develop and be more successful. And so we love working with these student coordinators. So super excited to feature Lily today on our podcast. Or our first myth that we received from some of our students that I talked to is that Virginia Tech is a party school. And so this is something that I really wanted to highlight and talk to Lily about, the myth versus reality of what Virginia Tech actually looks like when it comes to partying.
Right. So I feel like the reality definitely is that some students here at Virginia Tech do choose to, go out. But Virginia Tech offers a lot of different resources here on campus to kind of help students find different avenues of ways to spend their time and to also kind of help them make an informed decision regarding drinking or the use of any recreational drugs or making, those choices that people come into college and, kind of stereotypically make.
Right.
We like to say that campus is a party positive campus, meaning that we don't try to stigmatize partying in any way, but we do try to provide resources for students who do choose to party. A great resource is Hokie Wellness, which kind of just focuses on the student body's wellness as a whole. They offer this thing called the 21st Birthday Project. So when you turn 21, they give you a whole bunch of, education regarding drinking and making positive choices surrounding that, and give you resources, coupons to go out and get food and different things like that to just, kind of steer you towards making easier, safer, healthier decisions. But, Virginia Tech does have a very active downtown in downtown Blacksburg.
Right.
And, students do choose to go out and, participate in those recreational activities. But really, that is just up to choice and the decisions they make.
Right, definitely. I mean, just like any college, right, there's going to be the opportunity to party, and it's a matter of that individual student to make that decision for themselves.
There are definitely a lot of different options here on Virginia Tech's campus that we offer students if they don't want to participate in those activities, such as Weeks of Welcome, which we run through the first couple weeks of the year here at Virginia Tech. There's a Welcome Week concert, Gobbler Nights, a Gobbler Fest, along with tons of other programming that kind of, gives students activities that aren't necessarily going out and partying.
If your student is worried about that, some students might be looking forward to the opportunity to have that freedom and that opportunity for the first time, but if your student is really nervous about that and has no interest in partaking in that culture, they're gonna be just fine, because it is maybe the most obvious thing when you come to college. That might be the first thing you think of, but it's certainly not the only thing. There's programs that we put on through our office, but also free programming throughout the entire year that students can engage in, as well as a lot of other things in the Blacksburg community that they can get involved in that has nothing to do with partying.
So to answer that question, is Virginia Tech a party school? Right. I would say yes and no. It just depends on the student and the decisions they make.
Talking about options to do or things to do in Blacksburg, that is a really nice segue, because the next myth that one of my students submitted was that there is nothing to do in Blacksburg. And I wanted to include this one because, Virginia Tech and being a Hokie is important, but also they will be a resident of the Blacksburg community. And so we wanted to talk a little bit about what options there are. I know, as a relatively new, the last couple of years, resident of Blacksburg, I have found that despite it being really small, there's still a lot to do. One of my favorite things is the farmers market on Wednesdays and Saturdays downtown. But Lily, I'm interested to hear what you have to say about, that myth of nothing to do in Blacksburg.
Right. So, not going to lie on this one, Kenley.
Yeah.
Virginia Tech is in a very secluded location.
For sure.
Which I think kind of gives the illusion that there is nothing to do.
Right.
Just because to get to major cities in Virginia, it is a bit of a drive, bit of a time commitment. So, you know, sometimes students feel really secluded in this environment. But I would like to say that there is a lot to do in Blacksburg, in my opinion. You know, recreationally, there's tons of different options. You know, you can go to the trampoline park in Christiansburg. You can go bowling. You can go to a movie with friends, you know, sort of basic things. But then if you're more on the adventurous side, I definitely recommend checking out Venture Out through recreational sports. But also there's the New River Junction nearby where you can go tubing with friends, or there are tons of incredible hiking trails.
So much hiking.
You know,
available.
we are in a beautiful part of the state, and I definitely recommend checking that out.
Yep.
The farmers market, as you mentioned, there's tons of cute little shops downtown to check out. The Huckleberry Trail, to go for a walk, a run, a bike. I personally love walking around the Huckleberry Trail with my friends. And then, you know, also Virginia Tech, as I mentioned previously, has tons of programming for students to, you know, get them involved on campus and keep them entertained. So just because Blacksburg is in kind of a secluded area doesn't mean there's nothing to do. But you do kind of have to, you know, search for those opportunities. And I also like to say that there is a group here for everyone at Virginia Tech. So if you feel like there is nothing to do, I recommend checking out our over 900 student organizations and clubs, and kind of finding those groups of friends that have niche interests that intersect with your interests, and, you know, hanging out with them and planning excursions with them.
Exactly. Yeah. I think the key to finding something to do is finding people to do things with. And, you know, with your friends or with your classmates or someone who's in your organization, it can be really easy to find something to do, even if it is just walking around downtown and, you know, finding what you can get into. I know I mentioned earlier that this weekend I went to Roanoke with my mom when she came and visited. And I think that's another special thing about Blacksburg, is that even though, you know, downtown Blacksburg is exactly 16 blocks, which is not very many, you know, we're close to Roanoke, we're close to Floyd, and it's really easy to drive down into North Carolina. I went to Asheville last year, and so a lot is pretty accessible as well. So your student might have to get creative, but they certainly can find stuff to do. And like Lily said, this area of the state is absolutely gorgeous. I love personally watching the sunset. So, you know, encourage your student, if that's something they're interested in, finding a sunset spot that they like to go to. There's lots of really good ones. A lot of people will find a spot by the pylons on the drill field, and I know that they'll watch the sunset out there. And so definitely encourage them to take advantage of, you know, the nature that we have to offer here. Our next myth is that there is a pool on top of Slusher Towers. And so I admittedly know absolutely nothing about this myth, being that I did not go here for my undergrad. But Lily, talk to me about this pool.
So there are a lot of myths actually surrounding Slusher Tower. Slusher is the tallest building in Blacksburg. Fact.
Did not know that.
There is not a pool on the top of Slusher Tower, but there are bathtubs in Slusher.
Tubs aren't typically something you find in a residence hall, right?
In a residence hall. And, you know, personally, I wouldn't recommend using them.
Yeah.
But that's up to personal choice.
Right. Maybe bring some extra bleach and then take advantage.
Maybe.
Right. So no pool on top of Slusher is what we're saying, I guess. Is there a pool on campus if they want?
Yes, there is an Olympic-sized swimming pool in McComas, which is our gym here on campus.
Right.
And also plug for recreational sports. They offer so many great programming for students. You know, if you're interested in getting in the pool, I know a lot of students choose to, you know, get their lifeguard certification and work as a lifeguard here on campus. I know that some students even teach swim lessons to kids in surrounding neighborhoods in McComas. And also, you know, intramural sports in McComas, Battleship takes place.
Actual Battleship?
No. So do you know Battleship?
The game?
Yeah, you know the game Battleship.
Yeah, like where you're like, I sunk your battleship?
Yeah, so kind of like that. A group of, 2 to 3 students get in a canoe with buckets, and they fill those buckets with the pool water.
I had no idea that this existed.
And empty them into other, competitors' canoes and try to sink the canoes. The orientation team and I actually last summer got to do this, and it's a lot harder
right
than it sounds.
No, that sounds pretty hard.
Yeah. If you want a pool, there's a pool.
Right.
Unfortunately, there isn't a pool on top of Slusher Tower. Right. I think they should make an outdoor pool, but it would only be,
right,
available
operable so many times. Being from Florida, we had don't quote me on this, like 4 outdoor pools on campus.
No way.
Right. So actually coming to Blacksburg in general, it was funny because I brought bathing suits with me just because that's, something I've always had in my dresser. And then I realized that I literally could not name where there was a pool in the Blacksburg area. So good to know there is one in McComas, just not on top of Slusher, like people may believe. So our next myth is that Virginia Tech has the #1 food in the nation. Talk to me a little bit about the dining experience and your perspective. What's the food like here?
Myth, it is not #1 in the nation, but it does consistently rank in the top 5 of like niche and Princeton Review ratings for the best food in the nation. And I have to say, it's pretty darn good.
Yeah.
It's pretty darn good. So freshman students normally are required to live on campus their first year. And because you are living on campus, you're required to purchase a dining plan as well. There is absolutely a ton of options. There are 9 different dining centers and 46 different restaurants to choose from here on Virginia Tech's campus. So even though we're not #1 in the nation, maybe someday we are going to be.
Right.
I do think it's
pretty high up there.
Virginia Tech dining is incredible. I eat here every day for lunch.
Right.
So
Can't complain.
And, Virginia Tech, as I mentioned earlier, if you're living on campus as a first-year student, you're required to purchase a dining plan. But Virginia Tech actually sells more dining plans to off-campus students than on-campus students.
Interesting. I did not know that.
Meaning, even when it isn't required, students still choose to eat at Virginia Tech.
Right. It's not just because they have to. It's because they want to.
Yeah.
So our last Virginia Tech myth that we wanted to talk about is the drill field. So the drill field is, if y'all have not been to campus or haven't seen pictures of campus, is, that main greenery space central to campus. Lots of foot traffic over on the drill field. It's where the big snowball fight happens on the first snow in the spring. And so the drill field is a popular spot, but there is a myth going around that the drill field is sinking. And so, Lily, tell me about your experience with this myth. As someone who probably frequents the drill field, is it sinking? Tell me the truth.
This is actually true, Kenley.
What?
Yeah, this is actually true. People say there's a lot of reasons that the drill field is sinking, which is kind of apparent when you're on it. When you walk on either side of it, you walk down a hill. The drill field is named such because the Corps cadets do their drills and their physical training on it. So some people say the drill field's sinking because the cadets are pushing it down when they do push-ups. I have heard
that one. The push-ups, they're too strong.
Or just that all the foot traffic is, hammering the
field down.
I don't know if that's possible from a geological point of view.
I would say not, but also not my area of expertise. No idea.
But the real reason why the drill field is sinking is because there is a creek running under the drill field. It's called Strobel's Creek. It runs under the drill field and drains into the duck pond, which is on the end of the drill field, opposite side of the pylons. And because of this water running underneath the drill field, it's slowly sinking every single year. But there's nothing to worry about, If the drill field's in danger, you'll know.
Right.
You'll know.
Right. It is a slow but steady sinking, so certainly nothing to be alarmed of. But if you do hear about it, know that it's not inherently false, but may not be as big of a concern as you may think.
And go Hokies.
Go Hokies. Thank you so much, Lily. Appreciate your time and learning a bit more about Virginia Tech.
Thank you, Kenley.
After our discussion today, I think it's pretty safe to say that while some of these myths might have elements of truth to them, every student is going to have their own experience on our campus.
You're so right. It is, it's okay to have expectations of what college may be, but know that ultimately your student will have the independence and support that they need to do what's best for them.
We sincerely hope that you were able to learn a little bit more about what your student will really experience when they get to Virginia Tech. With all of the resources available to our students and the support of the faculty and staff on campus, we feel very confident that your student will quickly find that they are able to make their experience on campus their own, regardless of any of the myths or assumptions that they had about coming to school at Virginia Tech.
Thank you all so much for joining us on this episode of Hokie Track Chats, and stay tuned for our next episode.
Hokie Track Chats is brought to you by New Student and Family Programs at Virginia Tech. For more frequent updates, follow us on social media at Hokies on Track on Facebook or Instagram. If you are not already, join the Hokie Family Hub, which can be found at our website, students.vt.edu/transition. Music is Sun Say Yes by JL Brock. Editing software is Audition.